What's going on? Okay, so we have Joe Rogan, we have RFK, and we have the war in Ukraine. That's what RFK is answering right now. Joe Rogan asks him the question, how do we get out of that war? How do we solve that situation? And it's very interesting because RFK looks like he has the same outlook on that war as Trump does. Very, very interesting. But before we get into that, let's just get into this store. We got the Sold Not For Sale stuff. We got the anti-WF stuff. And we have the Great Resist stuff. Great Resist is the latest design released by myself, Coach Colin, and wife, because she's responsible for all of this. So you've heard of the Great Reset. Join the Great Resist instead. Or grab something that says Sold Not For Sale on it. And let people know that your soul is not for sale. That's IamCoachColin.com. If you're one of the people who already visited the site and have purchased something, we greatly appreciate it. You are so appreciated, and we thank you so much, more than you can possibly know. Now let's get into the actual video. Let's go.
I'll do that, but I don't need to do that because I have a lot of other issues, and my central issue is how do you rebuild the middle class, and how do we get out of these forever wars?
How do you get out of the Ukraine war?
The Ukraine war is easy to get out of. I mean, the Russians have been wanting to settle that war from the beginning.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, the Minsk Accords was a settlement, and that was, that we basically, encouraged Zelensky. As Zelensky ran in 2019, here's a guy who's a comedian and and an actor, which I'm not saying in a disparaging way, but he's...
You probably should.
My wife is those things too.
Yeah.
So, but how did he win with 70% of the vote? He won because he ran on a peace platform, promising to sign the Minsk Accords, which was an agreement that Russia, France, and Germany had all agreed to, which would have left Donbass as part of Ukraine as an autonomous region, so they can now enjoy their own language, the ethnic Russians, and protect themselves from attack by the central government, which was U.S. Installed central government, and that NATO would stay out of the Ukraine. And that's what the Russians wanted, a pledge that NATO will never go in, which we should have made for them. We have no business putting NATO in the Ukraine. We promised we'd never do that. We committed to it. And we've repeatedly violated those promises, and there's people in the White House who want this war, and they've said it repeatedly. Even President Biden has said the purpose of the war is to depose Vladimir Putin.
And what, install a puppet government?
Well, that's the thing. The same people who got rid of
Libya.
Saddam Hussein,
Yeah.
which cost us $8 trillion. And Iraq is now worse off than we found it. We killed more Iraqis than Saddam Hussein. We forced Iraq into this bondage to Iran, where they're now a proxy state of Iran. We've reduced that nation into this incoherent mess that is just a battle between Shia and Sunni despots. We created ISIS. We then had to do the Syrian war, the Yemen war, the Afghan, Pakistan. We drove 2 million refugees into Europe and destabilized every democracy in Europe for the next 2 generations and created Brexit. That's what we got for that $8 trillion and the ravaged middle class in our country. The same people who we thought, the neocons who ran that operation, lied to us about weapons of mass destruction, tricked us into that war, and who we thought were now out of government forever, pariahs, in disgrace. They're now all back in the Biden administration with a new project. And, Lloyd Austin, who's Biden's defense secretary, said the purpose of the war for us is to exhaust Russia and degrade its capacity to fight any place in the world. Well, that's not good for the Ukraine, because the way we're exhausting Russia is by butchering 350,000 Ukrainian kids. I mean, we have turned that nation into an abattoir of death for the flower of Ukrainian youth. In a geopolitical, and I'm not excusing Putin. Putin is a thug, a monster, a gangster who illegally invaded and didn't need to. We need to take responsibility for the provocations which we have, which these neocons have been provoking for over a decade. And by the way, the reason we're in that war is because Americans are good people. And, we were convinced, granted, we're using these kind of comic book depictions, that they're now, the military-industrial complex is now expert at selling from us of this kind of good versus evil, this whole thing that gets us into these wars. And that war is a money laundering racket for the military contractors. The money is going there and coming right back, and then they all go on CNN, the generals, et cetera, who, if you look at their resumes, they're all working for General Dynamics and the military contractors, and they tell us we need to be in this war and tell us horror stories, et cetera. But we're there because Americans are good people and they have compassion and they want to redress a wrong. And by the way, my son went over there and fought.
Yeah,
and he joined. He without telling us, he left law school and a summer job, and he went over there and joined the Foreign Legion and fought as a machine gunner for a special forces unit during the Kharkiv offensive. So, the Ukrainian people, the valor of those people, and the anguish that they're suffering is beyond any description. But we need to look at our role in it, and we need to look for roads to peace, and not try to end the killing.
Very, very true. Now, the reason I said that he has a very similar outlook on this as Trump is because Trump is just like, I could end this in 24 hours. And then, right away, RFK was like, this is a very easy situation to get out of. Like, both of them seem to think it's very easy. And then all of a sudden, the current administration is like, this is so hard. This is so hard. This is like $113 billion hard. Oh, we just don't know what to do. We just keep throwing money at it. It's just not working. I don't know. I really wonder if a lot of those things he's saying is true, because it's funny. You hear it on Instagram and you hear it on Twitter, but then you hear it from like this man who's like, the presidential candidate. He's a well-informed man. He's not a crazy, kooky person. And he's saying the same thing, just about the money laundering. I wonder. Crazy to think about. You know what else it makes me think about as I hear what he's saying? Those big numbers he's throwing out there. 1.3 trillion, 8 trillion here. What if the U.S., what if the government just put $3 trillion into the people? Like into the neighborhoods, into the communities, into training of officers so they could be like more well-rounded. Like, what if they just put that money in? Like, I wonder what would happen to the country. Put it into industry, put it into like American-made stuff. Like, you know what I mean? Like, really built the country up. I wonder what would happen. Really makes you think. Like, is there some kind of vested interest in not putting money into the communities, into not putting money into the people? I can't tell. It seems like there is, because they never do it. And there's always 100 billion to go here and a trillion or the 100, there's always so much to go everywhere else. But like, why doesn't it ever go straight into the land? Why doesn't it go into farming and building communities and bringing people together? Like, why doesn't it go into all that stuff? I wonder what suffers the most if, like that premise I just brought up, $2 trillion goes into investing into infrastructure and people, the downtrodden people, the lower class people, the hood, the urban communities. What happens? Controlling like drugs coming in through the border. Like, what happens if we just put a lot of money into that? I wonder what suffers. Because if we could figure out what suffers, then all of a sudden you figure out why they don't do it. I guess the jail industry starts to fall apart, which is, I guess it's considered needed. I don't know. We'd always need police officers, even if there was way less crime. I don't know. It really makes me think. When I hear somebody say $8 trillion went into something, I'm like, what if that just went into the country? Wouldn't it be so much better? Really makes you think about who's at the helm and what their plans have been. Because it's not just, You could always blame Biden. It's always easy to blame the current guy. But, you know, this has been going on for president after president after president. And none of them put money directly into the people to like, and I'm not talking about like universal income or anything like that. I'm not talking about that because that leaves you dependent on the state, and that's not a good place to be either. But I don't know, just building up some communities in some way, community centers. I always say to myself, if I had, like when I have, I like to speak things into the universe. When I have $50 million, I'm going to build a community center somewhere. I'm going to go to a bad place and build up something and have workers there who are then give these like kids who become terrible because of their surroundings and circumstance, give them a place to go to stay out of trouble. Like, I'm going to do that. Why doesn't the government? Why don't these celebrities? Aren't there a bunch of rappers who claim they're billionaires? I don't know. So many questions, but interesting to see his take on things, and also to bring up the fact that America has a role that they're playing, and they have to fess up to that. Not like they're hiding anything, but it's like they have to fess up and be like, okay, we're playing this part, and we need to instead be playing the part of how does this stop? Because right now it's like Ukraine is the small kid getting his ass kicked. Don't worry about what the news is telling you. They're getting their ass kicked. They really are. They are. Like they're doing damage as well. They are, of course, but they're not. U.S. stops giving money, they lose instantly, and they lose everything. It doesn't go back to the way it was. They lose everything for sure. You know, and it's like they're that young scrappy kid, and the U.S. is like that big kid that's like, no, you can do it. Go fight him. He keeps pushing him. He keeps coming back bloody, and he's just like, fight him again, man. Here, man. Here's a ice pack. Don't worry, fight him. Keep fighting him. And Russia's just like that guy from Rocky, that white blonde guy. If he dies, he dies. That guy. That's what Russia is. So I don't know. We need to kind of be the people who they need to be the people who step in the middle and say, this has to stop. And what is needed for both of you for all of this to stop. And I think everybody knows that. Everybody watching this knows that. Nobody wants to see Russia get blown to smithereens. No one wants to see Ukraine get blown to smithereens. That'd be terrible. That'd be absolutely horrible. We have people of both nations in North America, and they're doing great things. They're fighters, they're engineers, they're doctors, they're lawyers. We need those people. They're great. But like the video. It helps so much. Boost us out of the shadow realm. It helps so much. You have no idea. I am going to end it here. Other than that, I am out.